All right, what is up, ladies and gentlemen? Don't mind the two bowls in front of me. The one has open boiled eggs, the other one has closed boiled eggs, and I'm just having my breakfast right now. I just have 6 boiled eggs. Now, let's talk about something productive, right? The past couple of days, I've been relentlessly focused on signal versus noise and depicting the factors that differentiate those two, the differentiating factors. So this is really one of the highest leverage skills, at least in terms of progress, right? Obviously, because if you know how to filter the difference between these two things, then ultimately your entire trajectory can change, right? Like the biggest. Why? Because it is very easy to do the wrong activities, right? It is easy to do the wrong activities. And that is what we want to avoid. We want to avoid doing the wrong activities. And so when we do the wrong activities, we simply waste time, right? And by doing so, ultimately we just achieve less of our potential. And yeah, this it's not even got anything to do with money or anything. This is really just about, progress in general. It doesn't matter in what way you're trying to make that progress. So, what is the biggest thing, right? Well, when it comes to identifying signal versus noise, what you want is firstly, what is signal? Well, signal 90% of the time, this is just, a figure I am, completely estimating. But basically, majority of the time, it is going to be a high leverage activity. Okay, it is something that, majority of the time, signal is going to be the constraint, which technically speaking does not necessarily have to be something of leverage, but I will reverse it by saying a leveraged activity will most of the time be a form of signal, okay? Overall, right? And so I've been doing something, and I've created a process called execution loops. And I've been forcing myself to think in this way of execution loops. Just got some Himalayan salt over here. Now, essentially what this is, if we look at any kind of process, it runs in a loop, right? And I keep visualizing a treadmill. Now, in terms of, anti-procrastination mental models, I visualize it like, okay, we got a treadmill. The goal, let's say now in business, right? For the business to run. Let's say you're a new entrepreneur, you're struggling, blah, 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 right? The goal is to get this treadmill to run, right? You want the treadmill to turn on. And the thing about a treadmill is it's a machine, right? It is technology. It doesn't have emotions. The treadmill does not have emotions. If you turn the treadmill on, it's not going to, change its actions based on how it feels. It's just going to run. Now, the thing is, you can have a brand new treadmill that is super nice and shiny and everything just runs super well, right? It's very efficient. It's probably got the latest technology. It's got a much longer lifespan compared to one that's already been running for 20 years, right? However, the anti-procrastination mindset, okay, is we don't care how new the treadmill is. We just care that it works, right? And so starting out, we just want anything to loop, just like the conveyor belt on the treadmill. And so basically, I don't care if the treadmill is rusty. and old and shitty and slow. All I care about is when I click that button, right, to turn it on, that it actually turns on and runs. Cool. So most of the time when we are building a treadmill, so creating it, or updating the treadmill, let's say replacing one of the rusty parts to make it run smoother, that is a form of a high signal, high leverage activity. Most of the time, that is going to be worth doing because, to some extent, by definition, anything that you do once that can run after you do it once, infinite times, or at least multiple times, is leverage. And the amount of times that it can run more than the time it took you to build it is the multiplication of leverage, right? So if it takes you 1 hour, but it can run for 10, then you have a leverage of 10, right? 10x basically. And so again, like, I don't know if that is the true definition of leverage. Maybe, maybe not. I think there's many ways to calculate it, but that is kind of how I see it. And so most of the time that will be a form of signal. Now, obviously there are, different extents of this, right? So some will give a better ROI on time investment than others, right? One might take you 1 hour and give you 10 hours out. Another one might take you 1 hour and give you 100 hours out. There's also more than just time output as a measurement, right? There's other forms of output when it comes to leverage, right? But yeah, time is a pretty good one. I was thinking about Elon Musk, right? And Jeff Bezos. I think it's especially Jeff Bezos, right? Because he has so many employees at Amazon, right? So think about, like, if Jeff takes 2 hours to make a high leverage decision, or just, you don't even have to say high leverage. If he takes 2 hours to make a decision in his current position, and obviously he stepped down as CEO, but let's say he was CEO of Amazon still. If one of his executives came to him with something they need help with, they need his help with this, right? To make a decision. Like, Jeff needs to take an hour or 30 minutes or 20 minutes and sit down and just map out this decision, the pros and the cons. Like, if Jeff Bezos does a SWOT analysis, okay, on something that is actually worth his time, as a decision in Amazon, there are so many layers of leadership in Amazon, right? There's like well over 1 million employees at Amazon. Because that one decision impacts so many people, like literally the size of Amazon, and really the size of even companies 100 times smaller than Amazon, right? Because Amazon's like a $1 trillion company. So even a company that's 100 times, even a company that is 1,000 times smaller than Amazon is still $1 billion company, which is obscene to think about. But like, what am I trying to say? Like, even a company 1,000 times smaller than Amazon, right? They like, if they launch a new product line, it's actually essentially the same size as a new small business, right? A startup. And so when these companies, do R&D and they'll do a new product launch, or they'll open a new line of something, right? Service or whatever. They'll recruit a head of that department and really of that product line, and that's an entire company. And so take a look at like Alexa or Kindle at Amazon, right? That's actually its own entity, and literally it's its own subsidiary, right? But we can also see that as like a product line. Now, let's say something smaller, like AWS, right? Which is not small in any kind of way, but that is a product line of Amazon, clearly, right? Obviously, it's its own, I think it's its own independent company, right? With its own revenue, own accounting. I'm not 100% sure. I'm really just assuming. But overall, the amount of time that it took Jeff to decide on whether they should do AWS or not, whatever amount of time that took, maybe it took 100 hours or 200 hours, the amount of impact that 100 hours made, if you compare the input of that decision to the outputs of that decision, that is the extent of his leverage, right? Because AWS is its own, like I'm saying, it's big enough to be its own multi-deca-billion-dollar company, right? If not hundreds of billions. So that is, like, it took him 100 hours, let's say, or whatever, just assuming 100 hours to make that much in value. And then also, if you were to accumulate all the time of every person who worked at AWS to create the product and to get it where it is today, all based off of that one decision to make those hires, to create the product, and deciding that it is worthwhile pursuing, that is the extent of the leverage, right? And so for Jeff, for example, in that moment, there was like nothing higher leverage than that one activity, right? Of like deciding if they should run with AWS or not. And so, yeah, it's interesting. It's very, very interesting. But yeah, overall, one of the biggest and most valuable skills you can possess is the ability to depict signal from noise. And it seems obvious, but it is very different in reality, because it doesn't feel like it in the moment. When you are, you only realize it post doing the activity, right? When you look back, you're like, oh, so it's about being able to know that before the time, and then the ability to stay focused on that thing, even though you know that you want to do something else, you know that you have to do this thing, right? And staying focused relentlessly on that thing. That's two skills in one, right? The one is the skill to be able to identify, and the other one is to be able to focus enough to stick to that thing until it's solved. I would say that the combination of that is the most valuable thing. The highest leverage skill you could have is that. And, Elon Musk is really, really good at that. You can just see it, right? Number one, it's the discipline to be able to stick to the decision that you make. But number two, and he does, but number two, the thing he really does better than almost anyone is he's able to, almost unconsciously know. It's like intuitive. What is a waste of time and what isn't? And for many people, it is not intuitive. Like for me, it's not intuitive, right? In any way. I have to spend a lot of time thinking about what is worth pursuing. What is the biggest constraint right now, at all times. Like if you close a loop and you incorporate a new SOP, you incorporate a new execution loop, right? That's a high leverage activity, but then, when that's done, you have a new constraint, potentially, unless that thing isn't solved properly, in which case, that's a whole other thing, right? Which is like the commitment wasn't there. But as soon as that thing is actually looped and closed and updated, and created and executed, then you need to do that process all over again, right? And then obviously it's all about compounding, right? Compound interest is the eighth wonder of the world, and something that I am thinking about is like someone like Elon, back in his Zip2 days, X.com days, when he was really building, like PayPal, all these things, right? His signal was so high, and he basically he would just run execution loops all day long. And I think he did like 10 to 12 execution loops a day. I did 3 yesterday, right? Which is a very productive day. If you can, oh gosh, man, if you can do 3 execution loops a day, you are well, like into massive progress, right? But every additional one you can add to your belt on a consistent basis, this is the point, right? It is an SOP in and of itself. The SOP of creating SOPs is an SOP, right? But like, running that consistently, then that's the point about an SOP, is that it runs consistently, right? If you can do that every day, that compounds, right? That's where all the magic happens. So, but yeah, someone like Elon, I just feel like he did like 10 to 12 execution loops a day for like decades, right? And he just didn't stop. Even when he was a billionaire, he just did not stop, right? So, and then obviously like adding leverage to that, which is like, okay, well, what's the next best thing to do? Well, is to train other people to be able to run an efficient execution loop like you can, right? Like imagine you can just duplicate yourself, or at least 70% of that, right? Which is still massive progress. Like, let's say Elon could do 10 loops in a day. If he could get 100 people or 1,000 people to do 3 loops each day, and they're all independent from each other, then, that's like 3,000 loops a day. That's highly, highly productive, right? I think the main thing then in that case, the biggest constraint would be like actually getting them to work in synchronicity, right? Where they're like not overlapping. And then obviously there's teams, and like, the team, will combine its effort to create the execution loop or whatever. But yeah, pretty interesting. Pretty interesting. I'm just randomly just talking about what's on my mind right now. But yeah, guys, this is a huge skill, and it's definitely something that I am committing to really getting good at. I'm willing to like commit 1 to 2 hours a day for the next, I don't care how long it takes, right? It is worth it to spend an hour a day just breaking down the skill on a first principles basis and practicing, right? It's worth it. It's just like training for any other skill. I think this is the most worthy one, amongst a couple other ones. Like you can understand it intellectually, but if you're not taking action on it, it also doesn't matter. So the next, I would say the second highest leverage skill you can have is, and Elon also does this, you can see it, but it's the ability to turn off the one side of the brain, right? So you have to switch between your engineering mind, or like the deep thinking side of the mind, and then you should be able to immediately switch to full-on execution, like where you don't think, right? You just do, and that's a skill. And the latency, right? The delay between effectively switching between those two sides, right, of the spectrum is the extent of your productivity, right? Pretty much. So if you can just reduce that latency, you will be more productive. And the more you can reduce it, the more productive you will be, for sure, guaranteed. Because for most of the time, at least for myself, and I'm assuming it happens for most people as well, but like, I just don't switch, right? Out of comfort, I just won't switch. I'll just stay in creative mode, and stay in deep thinking mode, right? And then, but like, it was far past the time when we needed to switch already, right? Hours, and we just stay in that mode, right? And it just wastes time because that's not the constraint. Sometimes the constraint is deep thinking, and then it's also got to do with like beliefs, right? Your belief system. So, like, I'm telling you, like, think about it, right? Some people will literally define themselves and their identity as a certain way of thinking or like doing things, right? Like some people will even color code it, right? Like you get some of these personality types. It's like, yeah, I'm red over green. I'm red. Red is action. Green is like thinking. And you got like blue, and you got I think yellow, right? And so you like define yourself as that. Well, the thing is, like, dude, you need all of them. You need both, right? You can't just be stuck with one. And so, like, I see some people on one side of the spectrum. They're like, yeah, I don't think. I just do. I'm just an action taker, right? And then on the other side of the spectrum, you've got people like, I don't want to take just blind action. I want to like, think things through, and like that's the person who thinks, right? But dude, the most progress comes from doing both, right? Like if you honestly think that you're gonna make it to the top of whatever mountain you're trying to climb by not thinking and just taking action, you're stupid. Like that is literally denial. Okay, you need to be able to think. And most people nowadays do not know how to think. They're fucking lazy, right? They can't use their brains. And it's pathetic. It's pathetic. It's lazy. On the other side of the spectrum, we've got people like who really think really hard, right? And they're really good. They have the skill of thinking, and that's good. You need it. But then they don't take any action, right? Overthinking. There is something called overthinking, right? There's also something that's not overthinking, and you really are a hard thinker, right? And I would say like Elon, he's both. That's his skill. Elon can outthink almost anyone, and he can take action more than almost anyone, right? And he knows how to reduce the latency between switching between those two modes. And so that is, I would say, the second highest leverage skill that you could possess if you want to maximize progress. So yeah, anyway, these are just my two focuses. It's kind of side quests, side projects, side skills I'm working on, even though they're the main ones, right? But these are just where I'm putting my focus and dedicating for life, right? These are just lifelong skills that I'm committing to. And maybe we'll take, I don't know, like just try to accumulate the 10,000 hours in that as fast as possible so you can at least get through that, ignorance phase and actually start moving faster. But yeah, these are the two highest leverage skills that I'm personally committing to learning and getting good at mastering, right? They're worth mastering. Even if it takes 10 years, it's worth it, because after 10 years, you will be literally an unstoppable savage, right? And I do believe that if you can master these two skills. So yeah, hopefully that was helpful. And if you made it through to the end, then good on you. You're committed to success. And yeah, I hope you have a great week. And make sure to subscribe. See you guys in another video.